It started like any other ordinary Wednesday evening, the kind of day that slips through unnoticed between work emails and reheated dinners. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. He was sitting on the couch, absently scrolling through his phone, when her laughter echoed faintly from the kitchen. That familiar, lilting laugh used to make his heart swell, but lately it had started to feel distant, like hearing a song from another room. She had been secretive these past few weeks, clutching her phone a little too tightly, walking out of the room for calls that apparently couldn't wait. He wanted to believe it was just work stress, that maybe he was overthinking. But that night, fate decided to stop being subtle. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table beside him. A message preview flashed on the screen before disappearing. The name wasn't saved, just a number, but the words burned into his mind instantly. "I want to suck your," followed by a winking emoji and a heart. For a second, his brain couldn't process what he'd just seen. It felt like the world had tilted slightly, like he was underwater and everything sounded muffled. His breath caught somewhere between his throat and chest as his fingers trembled, staring at the glowing screen. The playful tone of the message was so casual, so intimate, so unmistakably sexual that it hit him like a physical blow. He didn't open it at first. He just stared, his pulse thudding in his ears, trying to convince himself there had to be some explanation. Maybe it was an inside joke, a prank text, a mistake, but deep down, a quiet voice he'd ignored for weeks whispered the truth. He could almost hear her laughter again, the one she used to share with him, and realized it hadn't been for him in a long time. The kitchen faucet turned off. He heard her footsteps approaching, the light rhythm of her slippers against the tile. His hands felt cold, the phone heavy in his grip. When she appeared, she was smiling, hair tied up, eyes soft from the glow of her phone. She said something about dinner, but her voice sounded far away. His throat tightened as he met her gaze, wondering if she could see the betrayal already reflected in his eyes. She noticed the phone in his hand and froze for the briefest moment, so brief that someone who didn't know her might have missed it. But he saw it, that flicker of fear, that instant of panic before she forced a smile. It was enough. In that silence, the walls of their life together began to crumble. Every memory, every promise, every "I love you," that now felt counterfeit. The text still glowed faintly on the screen like a cruel joke, a fragment of a truth he had never wanted to know. And in that instant, he realized the cruelest part wasn't the message itself. It was that it didn't even surprise him. She tried to snatch the phone from his hand, her voice trembling as she muttered something about it being just a joke. But the words came out too quickly, too rehearsed, and they cracked under the weight of her guilt. He didn't yell, he didn't even move. He just stared at her, eyes hollow, searching for something, anything, that could make this make sense. The air between them was thick, almost suffocating, as the faint buzz of the refrigerator filled the silence. She finally sat down across from him, her hands shaking as she reached for his. He pulled away. That tiny motion, the withdrawal of his hand, seemed to break her composure. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she started speaking fast, stumbling over her own excuses. She said it was just flirting, harmless, nothing physical, but the word harmless felt like poison in his ears. His mind flashed through the past few weeks, the late night showers, the new perfume she wore, the way she'd started dressing up to run errands. Every little change he had brushed off now pieced together like shards of broken glass, forming a picture that cut deep. He wanted to scream, to demand answers, but he was trapped in that quiet disbelief, his thoughts swirling in chaos. How do you confront the person you love when the evidence is already screaming the truth? He looked at her trembling lips, the way she avoided his gaze, and he realized she wasn't sorry for what she did, She was sorry for being caught? He stood up, pacing the room as if movement could calm the storm inside him. She followed him, grabbing his arm, pleading. It didn't mean anything. Her touch burned. He could smell the faint sweetness of her perfume, the same one that used to make him weak, and now it made him sick. The memories of their laughter, their late night talks, their quiet mornings, all of it felt contaminated. Her tears came harder when he didn't respond. She tried to hug him, but he stepped back. The rejection shattered her, and yet he couldn't feel sympathy. He was too broken, too numb, his heart pounding in his chest like it was trying to escape. He finally spoke, his voice low and cracked. Who is he? The question hung in the air, heavy and cold. She hesitated, biting her lip, her silence answering before her words could. That moment stripped away the last of his denial. There was no coming back from this. The woman he thought he knew, the one he'd trusted, the one he'd built his life with, had turned into a stranger wearing her face. He sank onto the couch, head in his hands, while she cried on the floor, whispering apologies he couldn't bear to hear. The room that once held warmth and laughter now felt hollow, like the ghost of their love lingered there, watching everything crumble. The hours after the confrontation bled into each other, time losing meaning as he sat in the dim light of their living room. The shadows on the walls stretched and shifted, like silent witnesses to everything that had just fallen apart. She had gone quiet, her sobs fading into shallow breaths, curled up at the far end of the couch. The air smelled faintly of rain through the open window, cool and heavy, mixing with the salt of her tears. He could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall, a slow, rhythmic reminder that life outside was still moving, even when his world had stopped. He kept staring at the phone on the table, its black screen reflecting both their broken faces, two people bound by love and now divided by deceit. At some point, she whispered his name, her voice barely holding together. "Please, don't leave," she said, but he couldn't look at her. Her words, once filled with warmth, now carried no weight, just empty syllables drifting through the silence. He wanted to ask her why risk everything, why destroy something that once felt unbreakable, but he knew no answer would ever satisfy him. Betrayal didn't come with logic, it came like a quiet storm, destroying without reason. He thought of their wedding day, the trembling of her hands as she slipped the ring onto his finger, the promises they made under the same sky that now mocked them. He thought of how certain he had been that she was his forever. That word, forever, now felt like a cruel joke. She tried to touch his arm again, and this time he didn't flinch. He just looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the person she'd become. Her mascara was smudged, her lips trembling, her eyes filled with regret. But there was no trace of the woman who used to make him feel safe. He stood up slowly, his movements heavy, and walked to their bedroom. Each step echoed like a closing door. She followed him, still begging, her voice cracking with every word. He opened the closet, pulled out a small bag, and began to pack. Mechanically, without looking at her. A shirt, a few essentials, nothing more. She collapsed onto the bed, whispering, "It was a mistake, I love you." He paused for a moment, then turned to her with eyes empty of anger or affection. "You loved me," he said quietly, but not enough to stop. When he walked out of the house, the night air hit his skin, cold and sharp. He didn't look back. The sky above was wide and indifferent, and for the first time in a long time, he felt something close to free, dim, painful, raw, but clean. The echo of that message still lingered in his mind, but it no longer defined him. He was walking away not just from her, but from the version of himself who had tolerated half-truths and blind trust. The street was empty, yet it felt like the world had opened up again, waiting for him to start over.